It's never been easier to hire the wrong attorney. It's also never been easier to be the right attorney.
Welcome to The Legal Edge, where we cut through the noise and get into what actually drives law firm growth. I'm your host, Rob Rosasco. David Craig has been a personal injury attorney for more than 40 years. He's the managing partner at Craig, Kelley Faultless, a 10-attorney firm with offices across Indiana and an office located in St. Louis, Missouri. He spent his entire career focusing on one practice area and one practice area only: truck accidents and commercial vehicle cases. He is one of fewer than 100 attorneys in the United States to hold board certification in truck accident law from the National Board of Trial Advocacy. And in Indiana, he's the only attorney to have received the Thurgood Marshall Fighting for Justice Award given by the Association of Plaintiff Interstate Trucking Lawyers. He's also the author of It's Never Been Easier to Hire the Wrong Attorney, which was published last year, and host of After the Crash, a consumer-facing podcast ranked in the top 5 among personal injury podcasts nationally. Both exist for only one reason: to give accident victims the knowledge and the power they need to ask the right questions before they hire the wrong law firm. What makes David's experience interesting for this audience isn't just his credentials. It's that he's built all of this without an outrageous marketing budget that's on par with the big advertisers, the mass marketers, the VC-backed lead generators, the firms with countless billboards in your city. He's not trying to outspend them. He's building something different. David, welcome to The Legal Edge.
Thank you, Rob. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk with you today.
Good deal. Thank you. David, I'd like to start with where your book starts, the It's Never Been Easier to Hire the Wrong Attorney book, because that title says something out loud that most people in our industry feel, but simply won't say. You've been practicing personal injury law for over 40 years. You've watched the market change. And at some point, you decided that the average person needed a guide to help with hiring the right lawyer. You said something during our preparation call that I keep thinking about. You said it's never been easier to pick the wrong attorney, but it's also never been easier to learn how to be the right attorney. Most people would stop at the first part, but you didn't. That's a more complicated argument. I think it's the best place to start our conversation. Before we dive into tactics, give me the quick down and dirty version of how you got here and what you're actually doing right now in the market.
Yeah, so I appreciate it. I saw people picking the wrong attorney, and it happens. I think all attorneys see it. You graduate with a bar degree. I can practice law. I can do estates. I can do divorces. I can do any kind. I can do contracts. But I guarantee you don't want me to do those things. I'd be horrible at them. I know that. Lawyers know that. I know which lawyers to refer. If somebody calls me and says, I need a divorce lawyer, I need a family or custody lawyer, I need a criminal lawyer, I need a contract or an estate planning lawyer. I know from being in the industry for 40 years who's good at it. What I realized was that the average person, the average consumer of legal services has no idea. They don't have a clue. And so it was like, you know what? I'm going to write a book. It's probably not going to make me real popular with other attorneys, but I'm going to write a book because my marketing has been and continues to be, can I help someone? Can I make a difference? And that's kind of the keystone to my marketing. And so I decided, why not write a book? And it has been different. The reactions I've got from some folks has been exactly what I expect, which is, holy cow, you're calling me out on it. I've had clients who have thanked me. I've had people who were never going to hire me, but yet who read the book, who have thanked me. And I've actually even surprisingly had some attorneys thank me.
I would want an attorney to be interested in your book and what it contains, because I want them to look at the world through my eyes and be prepared to, better understand what it is that I've gone through. And I think your book certainly helps prospective clients, those people that are suffering with that, to, again, take that negative experience and formulate questions that will help them, get to a better place. So.
And you hope they empower them.
Yes.
I mean, you got people out there that are quite frankly intimidated. I mean, they're going through a horrible thing, or maybe they're just trying to do estate planning, or maybe it's a family law, or maybe it's a personal injury or a truck wreck like I do. Mm-hmm. And they're scared. They may have never hired a lawyer. They may have never dealt with a lawyer. And so what we want to do is empower people to not be scared of us, to actually, we put our pants on the same way everybody else does. We're no better or worse. And so as human beings, and so what we want to do is empower people to say, you know what, it's okay to ask questions. Mm-hmm. It's okay to, this is a significant issue in your life. You deserve the best. You deserve somebody who's compatible with you. And by God, let's help give people that guidance to do that. And that's kind of what I intend to do with the book. I hope that people out there will read it and walk into lawyers' offices, regardless whether it's mine or someone else's, and ask the questions that need to be asked and feel comfortable and feel empowered that, I even talk in the book about it. If a lawyer doesn't want to answer the questions you're asking, then that's a red flag. That's a red flag. You ought to walk out, because no lawyer should make you feel stupid for asking a question. And if they are, they're probably hiding something else. And I think that's just the wrong lawyer to be with, regardless of what kind of area of law it is.
Looking at it from the consumer's perspective, I agree with you completely. Okay, so the personal injury advertising market looks very different today than it did 20 years ago, 30 years ago. Walk me through how that actually looks from where you sit. Who are the players, and how did the dynamic shift over time?
I mean, I'd been doing this for 40 years, and I graduated from high school in 1978, and that's right when legal advertising started. Like 1977 was the Bate versus Arizona Supreme Court case. And so, you start seeing television. Prior to that, it was pretty easy. Every county had a dominant law firm, and they were on the courthouse square, and they had lawyers that did a little bit of everything. And then all of a sudden you had television advertising, and you had yellow pages of radio. So that was predominantly the way the kind of people started getting into the market. And you started seeing some statewide practices start saying, okay, I'm going to do personal injury, or I'm going to do drunk driving, or whatever it happens to be. They started niching a little bit and started marketing it, and started kind of taking some of the business away from the smaller county lawyers that used to dominate that field. And so you had a lot of old-time lawyers who were really against advertising, against marketing, because they used to dominate. I mean, if you heard it in their county, you went to that big law firm. And so, we saw some changes, but then we started seeing it really grow. And you started seeing, radio and billboards and television and sporting events. And then it's escalated today where you have the internet, of course. And that completely changed the way we do things. And not only do you have that, but as it's gotten more competitive, unfortunately, it doesn't bring out always the best in people. And so when you have business going away and you're struggling to pay bills, some lawyers become a little more desperate. And so you're seeing things that I never saw before. You see runners, you see direct marketers, you see people walking in and just personally soliciting, which is pretty much not allowed in any state. And so you started seeing this really bad behavior happen that didn't used to happen because it wasn't as competitive as what it is today. And then I thought, well, I've seen it all. And then all of a sudden, venture capital came in the world. And all of a sudden, it has completely changed. You still have all that other stuff. But on top of that, now you have venture capital backing marketing companies so that they can get you cases in what they call lead generation companies. And they go out and get you cases, and then they sell them to whomever will pay the price for them. But it has dramatically changed in the marketing and the availability. It's made case acquisition more expensive. You've got bigger players who seem to be rushing through the country, trying to be in every state, at least in the personal injury world. But you see this consolidation. I saw one of the big firms is going to spend $500 million this year in advertising and marketing nationwide. And so it has definitely changed. It's different today than when it was 20 years ago.
Money just impacts so much of our lives and can drastically change, the people's, morals and scruples, how money impacts all of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm a trial lawyer, so I learned to try cases. When I started practicing law, I spent all my time studying and reading and learning on how to be a good trial lawyer. And after thousands of hours of learning, then I was able to take that and adapt to practicing law, trying cases, what worked for me, what didn't work for me. And I learned to be, I thought, a decent trial lawyer. Most of us, though, have never spent those hours or thousands of hours figuring out how to market. In order to be a great trial lawyer, I have to put the time, effort, and energy into becoming a great trial lawyer. But to be a marketer, what do I do? And so I think a lot of folks, a lot of lawyers are out there just kind of at a loss because it's inconsistent with what they studied in undergrad and in law school.
I've said this countless times, having been in the industry a number of years myself. I've met some of the most intelligent people on the planet in the field of law, those that could probably solve most of the world's problems. But ask them questions about managing their business and most specifically about marketing, and they shrug their shoulders. That's why I hire you or someone like you to do it for me, because we didn't learn this in law school. So, yeah.
But the skill set, especially if you're a trial lawyer, you learn how to win.
Yeah.
You don't get to try the good cases. You try the bad cases or the ones that have some kind of problem or issues with them. And so you learn how to adapt and how do I win that case. And the better you come as a trial lawyer is the more you're able to figure out how to win the more challenging cases or to get full value out of cases. And marketing is no different. I mean, you don't get to say, okay, I don't want you guys spending $500 million. I don't want you to come in my market. You don't get to say those things. Those are the realities in which I practice. So the question really is, okay, how do I win? Because I don't plan on losing. I don't plan on losing a trial. I don't plan on losing in business. So what do I need to do differently? How do I adapt? How do I change? How do I win? And it is different today to win in marketing than it was 20 years ago.
So over the years, you've watched countless law firms build massive visibility through advertising. I mean, you just mentioned a firm spending $500 million on advertising in a year. You've also seen what happens inside some of their matters that they're handling. What's the gap that the consumer can't see looking in from the outside between the firms that, again, built that massive visibility and their ability to try cases?
I don't think marketing is bad. I think it educates people and provides helpful information. I just feel like it needs to be, if it's a major event in your life, you deserve the best. And you don't know how to do that. And so as a consumer, and so you try to educate. So just because someone spends $500 million doesn't make them good or bad as a lawyer. Just because someone has a billboard doesn't make them good or bad. Just because they have an ad in the urinal at the bar doesn't make them good or bad. And that's what you need to learn, is that it doesn't make. So what does make you good? And those are the things you have to look for. And in some of the firms that do the mass marketing, unfortunately, they don't have the skill set necessary to make them good, or they don't have the customer services to make them good. I mean, there's a whole bunch of things that in my mind, make a lawyer a good fit for a client. And those are the things you need to be looking at. And the bigger you get, it gets harder. It's quite frankly, it's really hard to have a certain kind of thing, certain type of rules, have certain kind of empathy that clients are going to be the first and foremost, and it becomes more of a process. And then when venture capital jumps in and buys up your office and they start cutting corners and trying to make it more efficient, well, efficiency doesn't necessarily mean that you're available to talk to a lawyer at 11 o'clock at night when things are really bad. I talked to a client last night at 10 o'clock during the basketball game. It's like it was a new prospective client, but that was a big deal to them. And so it was a big deal to me. But you lose some of that in some of these other firms that they're looking at it purely as a business model, which it is a business. We need to make a profit. But at the same time, I think you have to look at it and say, okay, what is it that makes you good? There are some volume practices, for example, and I won't say names, but there's one big volume practice that does a lot of advertising. And then they have a different part of their firm that does the trial work because they don't want people to know they're the one and the same, because they're afraid they'll be tainted because of the type of advertising they do. Well, that's sad. If I can't feel good about the message I'm putting out, and I have to use a different name, that's not good. No. Some volume firms don't have trial lawyers, for example. They just want to settle cases. But there are some that do. So I think, the goal would be to try to figure out which ones do, which ones fit, which ones are good lawyers.
And your book helps bridge that gap. Is that an accurate statement?
I mean, it goes and says, okay, what kind of questions, what do you need to know? First of all, like what's proper? I mean, I've had clients, in the hospital. I do semi cases. So they're catastrophic injury cases or death cases.
Mm-hmm.
So those are large cases. The value of the cases are very high. And so people will be a little bit more sleazy to get those cases because the risk reward is if I can get that case, I can make a lot of money. And so maybe that's more money than they'll ever make in their entire career. So they're willing to take a little bit more of a chance. But I've had people personally deliver police reports in the hospital to people. I had a case over in Kansas City. The clients were in the hospital in Kansas City. The accident would happen in Missouri. It was a semi case, and person came into the hospital. The husband was in there. The wife was in a coma, and they came into the hospital and told the husband, "I was on the helicopter ride. I was a paramedic on the helicopter ride with your wife. I held her hand and prayed for her. How is she doing?" And he said, "Oh, thank you for coming in, checking on her, and thank you for your prayers, and thank you, blah, blah, blah." And he had just gone down to get a cup of coffee. So when this guy approached him, and turns out I deposed everybody on that helicopter. Eventually it was a referral from someone else, and this guy was not. And when he was leaving, he said, "You're going to need a good lawyer," and gave him a card. And so my client didn't know that was unethical. I mean, he didn't know what the rules of professional ethics are. He didn't know personal solicitation is pretty much barred in every state of the country, and that there's even restrictions on written and different types of things. And so that was, the book was designed to say, hey, what is permissible? Because if a lawyer is willing to do that to get you as a client, then how do you know that lawyer, she or he's not going to sell you out down the road? I mean, if they're unethical, they're unethical. And so you can't assume they're going to be ethical with you if they're going to be unethical in just getting the case to begin with. And so I wanted to point out in the book, well, what is proper, what's not proper? And then going beyond that, how do you determine whether the lawyer is qualified to handle whatever it is? And the bigger the matter, the more significant it is, the more you should be concerned about picking the right one. So if you're in a car crash and you have a sore neck and you get better within 5 days, maybe it doesn't matter who the lawyer has as long as they're a personal injury lawyer and they do that type of work. But if you have a family member who's your husband or your breadwinner is the wife is killed and you have little kids, then it does matter that you have the right attorney. Or if it's a custody battle, or if it's estate planning, or whatever that is, the more significant it is, the more important it is. And so in my book, I go through and talk about how do you figure out whether they're the right ones, whether they're qualified. And then the next step is even assuming now you've narrowed it down to who's qualified, who is a good fit for you as a person? And that's the next step. And that's the last step in the book.
Okay, all right. So many law firm owners that may be listening right now firmly believe or may even know with absolute certainty that they are the highest quality firm in their market. They know it, their clients or prospective clients know it, members of the community know it, but they're being outspent by a competitor who doesn't really have the experience, the skill set, or a track record of established outcomes. What's your honest read on why that gap exists, and is the gap closing today?
My honest opinion is that I don't think it's closing. I think it's getting more challenging. I mean, I just think that the venture capitalists and the amount of money that's going into lead generation and some of those things is making it tougher to compete. If you're looking to compete just monetarily, the thing is that, so I'm going to be outspent in the market. So what? So how do I win despite the fact that you're seeing now national players come into your market, regional players come into your market, you're being outspent. So then the question is, okay, it can be a self-fulfilling prophecy. I hear lawyers tell me all the time, I can't stay in business. Mm-hmm. And you see older lawyers just say, heck with it, I'm just giving up. And it is a self-fulfilling prophecy, but it doesn't have to be. You have to figure out a different way to compete. You have to figure a different way to out the market. And I look back at, I'm a business major, and I look back when I remember Walmart came into communities. So Walmart came into communities, and when they first came into communities, people loved them. People were like, oh my God, we got this big store coming in, and it was fantastic. In cities, they were giving them tax breaks and doing everything they could do to get a Walmart in town. Mm-hmm. Well, then all the local businesses started going out of business. Mm-hmm. The hardware store, the Hallmark stores, they started going out of business. And then all of a sudden, communities started fighting Walmarts. They didn't want Walmarts to come in their communities. They would boycott. They would have these big meetings because they were afraid that it would put local businesses out of business. And so your local businesses were downtown. Walmart would go out on the outside. And so all your local businesses downtown would go out of business. But what's interesting about that story is that some people learned to adapt. Some people moved from downtown to out by Walmart. Instead of selling everything, they started niching and doing things differently. And they became more successful than they ever could have been because of the traffic. And so you don't have to be scared of these big conglomerates. You just have to figure out, how do I take advantage of it? And how do I market differently? If that makes sense.
Yeah, no, complete and total sense. And I think that's been true for many, many years. Things change. You have to figure out how to, adapt. You either adapt or die. So yeah, understood. You very plainly said the only way that your firm can compete, because you're not spending as much money as the mass marketers or the venture capitalists, is that you have to come up with something unique and different. And your unique and different was figuring out how you could help people. So you built a podcast, you've written books, you publish a blog. Here's what's interesting. Quality attorneys in other states and people who you've never met are using your material, your book, your podcast, so they can figure out how to survive in today's legal marketplace, how they can hire the right attorney. The prospective clients can not only ask questions that help them better move through that process more effectively, attorneys now know what questions are going to be asked so they can prepare for those questions and in turn improve themselves and their practice. I'd like to better understand how the model works for you.
It was an appointment. It was a wrongful death case, a horrific death involving a semi. And so the family was extraordinarily distraught. They had 3 children and a significant other. And they had reached out to my office. My office understood what to do with that call. And so I talked to these people. And I think they called on a Friday. And I said, I would be happy to meet with you tomorrow on a Saturday. So that's the first thing that distinguishes us, is that not everybody will go up and show up on a Saturday. And so that was the first thing. And I show up at the meeting, and the lady, she didn't bring my book with her, but she started asking me questions that I knew were from my book. And I'm like, here's the questions you should ask a lawyer. And so I realized real quickly, and I don't even think the rest of her family knew. She was asking me these questions, and I'm like, well, that's a really good question. And I answered it and talked to her. And eventually I asked her, I said, well, I can't help, but so these questions sound very familiar. And she smiled and she goes, I read your book. I ordered it off of Amazon and I read the whole thing last night. And he stepped in and he said, we've narrowed it down to 3 law firms. And we had 2 other interviews and they wanted to meet with us on Monday. So we're meeting with them on Monday. So we promised them we would not make a decision until after we had a chance to meet them. Well, I first thought, guys, darn it, because if you're the first, the odds are they might hire somebody that they be more recent. And so, but it is what it is. I'd taken the time to meet these people on Saturday, and I felt good because she had read my book. And so I knew that the 3 lawyers that she had selected, ourselves and the other 2, were probably good quality attorneys if she followed the instructions that I had in my book. So I felt like at least her family's going to get to the right attorney. May not be me, but they're going to get to the right attorney. And so when they're getting ready to leave, they said, do you want to know who the other attorneys are? And I said, no. I said, it doesn't matter to me. I mean, I know that if you've read my book, then you've at least narrowed it down to quality attorneys. And I said, the only thing I would ask, and I think it's important, is, how do they make you feel? How do they make you feel when you walk out of there? Because you now know they're qualified. Now, the next question is, you're going to spend a couple years, maybe a year and a half, 2 years with this lawyer, this law firm. How do they make you feel? Do they make you feel like you should feel fortunate that you have them as your lawyer? They are so good that you should feel grateful that you have them as your lawyer. Or are they more like me, that I am honestly grateful if you pick me? I would feel honored to have the opportunity to work for your family and to help your family. I go, it's a subtle difference, but there is a difference. And I would just ask you to take that in consideration when you're picking a lawyer. Fortunately, I think I probably told you before, is that I wouldn't tell you the story if they didn't pick me. So they did pick me. And I asked them then who were the lawyers after they came back. and I met with them again. And both of those lawyers were really good lawyers, and they would have been qualified and they would have been in good hands had they gone to either lawyer. I know both of them and friends with both of them, and I think they would have been in good hands. But there was a difference, the way I run my firm and the way they run their firms. My firm is consumer oriented. We are a customer, the client that is the most significant thing to us. It's not just the quality of the work we're doing, but how we're treating people, what we're doing in the process. And we have built in systems that deal with all those things. And most law firms don't have those. Mm-hmm. And I have those. I have a sociology major from college who does my intakes. I have a psychology person who was answering the phones at that time. I have a client, we call him a navigator. When I had cancer and at one point in my life, and so I had this navigator who helped coordinate my doctors, my therapy, my radiation, my chemo. I really thought that was a cool person to have who kind of kept it all together. So we've got a navigator. And so from the very beginning, when a client gets onboarded, then they continue with them and help navigate them through the process.
That's great.
And so there's a whole bunch of different things that we do that I think are unique, which help us compete with those gorillas that you talked about, those big spenders. And the book, Becoming an Authority, I think all those things were critical in getting that client into us. And you're right, other law firms have told me that they're qualified. They know me. I know them through speaking at other conferences. And they use my book and hand it out to clients, potential clients, because I'm not in their market. And it reinforces, well, here's another lawyer who says, here's what the things you should look for. And I check all these things off.
I think it only strengthens their position in their prospective client's mind in that they are client focused. Once you get to the point where you realize that your attorney is qualified from an educational standpoint and they have the experience to support my needs, that last box to check is, are they client focused? And I think your book does that. And, again, it does it with a huge exclamation point. And David, you shared a couple of minutes ago in sharing that story that it's a subtle difference between viewing the attorney as grateful for working with them as opposed to the attorney thinking the client should feel grateful. You qualified that as a subtle difference. I completely disagree. I think it's a huge difference. I might have shared with you when we talked initially that my wife is a pharmaceutical sales rep. So she calls on doctors every single day. I call on lawyers every single day. And it's amazing to me how different professionals can be, lawyers or doctors, in terms of their perspective. And at the end of the day, we are all service businesses. And I think it's really important that as a service professional, you should feel grateful that a prospective client has chosen you for their business. So kudos to you. And I respect the fact that that's the way you've built your business because, who am I? But that's the way I think service businesses should be built. That's what we are, service providers.
Yeah, thank you for that. And my goal is to make a positive difference in the lives of others. And if that's your goal, then by helping people, by making people feel comfortable, by helping people through the worst times in their lives, having people hug you with tears in their eyes when you've helped them through a process, people don't know whether it's a good settlement or a bad settlement, or it's a good verdict or a bad verdict. They certainly know how they've been treated through the process.
Agreed.
And so you really, and how would you want to be? I know, for example, when I had cancer, I know how scared I was. My wife was really scared and all that. And I know how the navigator and the doctors and the nurse practitioners and the radiation, all those people, the chemo people, they made me feel comfortable. They made me feel like I mattered. Yeah. They made me feel like I wasn't just another patient. And I believe, and that's a service business. I mean, and there are good doctors. There may be doctors that were just as good as the doctors I had. And my doctor was really good. I qualified before I picked him. I figured out who was really good. And so I had a handful, but it's the same thing.
Yeah.
Okay. You got to pick somebody who's good. And I think that's something I don't want to make sure it's not lost, is that it's not just marketing and being consumer oriented. The starting place is being good at your craft.
Absolutely.
I mean, I could have the most friendly chemotherapy cancer doctor in the world, but if they're terrible, then I'm going to get a bad result.
Yep.
That's not what I want. I want a board certified person who's the top or the best that they can be. But then I also want somebody who cares about me as a human being.
Right.
And that's where I'm getting at, is that I think lawyers need to be good at whatever it is they're going to be at.
Agreed.
And then they need to take care of the people and treat the people the way they would want to be treated.
Completely agree. All right, let's talk a little bit about your podcast. Your After the Crash podcast has somewhere in the neighborhood, I think, of 60 episodes online today. And at the end of the day, you will probably never represent the lion's share of people who listen to your podcast. How does producing that podcast fit into your business strategy?
Yeah, so everything comes back to, how can I make a difference in someone's lives? How can I help them? And that's whether it's a blog, whether it's an article, whether it's a video, or whether it's a book, or whether it's my podcast. So I started off with the book, and then I thought, boy, I got a lot of good feedback from the book that was helpful to people. And so then I thought, well, the podcast, I can go in even more depth. And then when I consulted with people about podcasts, they're like, well, you can talk about, you love barbecue, and you can talk about barbecue. I said, well, I do know barbecue and hot dogs, but how does that help my clients? And I thought, there's people out there who don't even know what an accident reconstructionist is. They have no idea what a economic loss is. They have no idea what a future care plan is. So I started off doing all kinds of personal injury. I migrated to trucking, and I've always done trucking my entire career. And I thought, how can I put out information that's helpful to people so that they can look that stuff up and they can talk to the lawyer, whoever they hire, intelligently about the process? And it's been game changer for me. It also creates content that is very niche oriented, that talks about the things that I care about, which is truck accident law. And so every month I'm putting out, and every week we do clips. Every month we're putting out content that's very specific, very focused on truck wrecks or serious injury, wrongful death type cases. One of the things that's been helpful to me is I call last night. I was eating dinner, and my wife, who runs my practice, says, well, you just got a form on your website. Someone was in a truck accident. Well, the problem is when people are in a truck accident, it is horrible. And so they want to talk to somebody. And I went in business to help people. And so what am I going to do? I'm going to take the call. And so I called them back that night. I went out to my car, called her, and they answered her questions. And one of the things I said was, look, how did you find out about me? And she said, well, on the website. And I said, well, you're going to have a lot of questions. And one of the things I will tell you is that trucks are different. First of all, you have to have a mechanical expert. If you happen to I have a podcast called After the Crash. If you go to YouTube, the gentleman if you hire me, the gentleman who's going to inspect this truck, the mechanic, he's episode 42. The reconstructionist I'm going to hire in your case because of where the location is, he's episode number 1.
That's funny.
And I also interview the head of my rapid response team. And you know what? I have not lost a case since I started writing books and doing podcasts that I have competed for. Because I think that if that tells people care enough, I'm willing to take my time and my money to put out information that's helpful to them. And it's far more than they can ever get on an hour telephone call or a 15-minute telephone call. They can, in their privacy of their own home, sit and watch that and learn. And then I say, watch that. Tomorrow, my office will reach out to you. We'll talk to you in the morning. Suzanne will call you. And if you're interested, she'll send you the documents. You can sign it right there. Depending on which podcast you watch, I want you to write down questions. And then questions you get from my podcast, and I want you to talk to me about it. And I want to answer all your questions. And then, by the way, we'll overnight you my 2 books that I've written on this subject. And, I think, guys, by helping people, you end up getting a high conversion rate.
Yeah. David, you've created a great model. I'm sitting here listening to you, shaking my head, thinking, yeah, that's a really good idea. And I think most people who take in the content, and I can only speak for myself, but I think I'm the average person, don't necessarily have the thought in mind that the motivation behind making the content is to get hired. You've created that content. You talked about investing time and money to create that content just to help people, to educate them. And if they happen to hire you, good for you, good for the firm. But at the end of the day, you've created this content really to help empower people to, make good choices.
And there's more people, I'm sure, who take my content who don't hire me.
Oh, I'm
But
sure.
I feel very, very, I'm very satisfied that I'm making a difference in their lives because they're asking the right questions and they're getting to the right lawyers.
Right.
And I think that's ultimately the goal. I think if you do that, I mean, the good news is good guys win. The good ladies win. I think if you're consistent, well, I think a lot of times people lose, they don't stay with it consistently, but it's truly something that you believe in and you're passionate about. It's pretty easy to create the content and do the things necessary to help people, which then by helping people, it comes back to you. I can't explain it, but I can tell you that it does work, that when you do the right thing for the right reason, it comes back to you.
All right, let's shift gears a little bit. So this is a problem that I often see with the law firms that I work with. The owner of the firm is a great lawyer. They built a quality law firm, but at the end of the day, they're it. They are the law firm. Every case, every matter that comes through the firm, is managed by them. Every client relationship is lives in their head. They can't take a day off. They can't take a week off. They can't really stop and think about what could potentially happen to the business, without them there. They're the rainmaker, and also they're still operating as if they're the only one that can potentially, do that, bring in the work. You said something in our prep call that I think deserves more attention. You kind of mentioned it fast and sort of as an aside, but this is what you shared. You have 10 attorneys at your firm, and every one of them started their legal career at your firm, I guess as a law clerk or some support to the attorneys. Most of the attorneys at the firm have been there for some time. I believe both your son and daughter are attorneys at the firm. You mentioned just a few minutes ago, your wife runs your operations. That's a structure that you built deliberately in order to create your firm. So talk a little about that. How did you build a law firm where every attorney started their legal career with your firm, and most of them have been there for decades?
Scott Faultless is one of the founding partners of this firm, and he was a law clerk of mine over 30 years ago. B.J. Kelley was the other founder. He was the only other one that I had known. I met another firm that he was with. All the other ones were law clerks or a legal intern with my law firm. And I will tell you, it's a slow way to grow, but I hire lots of law clerks. So I've always got law clerks in my office building. I have summer clerks. I have clerks that will work part-time during the school year. And so I have lots of law clerks. And I love it because I was a law clerk once. People gave me an opportunity to learn from them. And so I feel like we give back, we make a difference, and we help law clerks learn. And so whether they're going to stay here or not. But then by having them here, I get to pick the ones that are a good fit for my law firm. And it's not necessarily the ones that are the smartest, although mine are very smart. It's a combination of things, but they have to understand clients come first. And if they don't get that, no matter how good they are, they're probably not going to be a good fit for my law. So I get to know people, and I can not only get to know them, but I get to know their significant other. And that's important. But if your spouse or your significant other is not supportive of what you do, then that's going to be tough on you to be successful. And so I get to know the people. I get to know their families, their kids, if they got them. And so that has been a really good way for me to grow. And I don't lose folks that way because you're a good fit for each other. Same way with paralegals, secretaries. We started this law firm almost 27 years ago. And it was my wife and my two other partners and myself. We had no clients. We had nothing. And now 27, almost 27 years later, we have 10 lawyers, 50 employees, and we have more cases than what we should have I'm very proud that we do have, but we've been very successful and I'm very grateful for that. It's just, I've got to know people. They get to know me. They get to trust me. They know that I care about them. I don't care if you're the janitor or if you're what position you are. We're all the same. On a given day, the receptionist may be the most important person in my office when that call comes in. And I may not be doing anything that's that important. On another day, when I'm getting ready to go to trial, or I'm getting ready for a huge mediation or a deposition, what I'm doing may be very important. But it varies depending on what day and what role people are playing. Not only do I care about my clients, but if you would come in my office, the FedEx people, when they walk into my building, they go in and help themselves to the drinks. They go in and help the snacks. They give my dog a bone. Usually my dog's not here today, but usually I give a golden doodle who's here. They come over.
I was looking on the couch to see if he was
Yes, she's
back
usually
there.
here.
I haven't seen you
She's
yet.
usually
So
here, but she's not here today. But usually they'll
okay.
bring a
Her.
biscuit over to my dog. I have breakfast cooked every Monday for my staff, and I have lunch cooked every Thursday for my staff. The FedEx, the UPS, and the mail people know what time I have breakfast, what time I have lunch, and they come in, and because we try to be nice people, and that should be resonate not just my clients, but also my employees, my attorneys. I share information with them that a lot of law firms don't. A lawyer calls me and says, "Hey, I want to go to lunch. I want to have a beer. I want to have breakfast, cup of coffee." I'm always willing to share my ideas and whether it's right or wrong, I'll share what my beliefs are. And I had a lawyer come to me and say, "I was told never to share ownership with any of my attorneys, that I should own the control. I should always own the firm and just hire people and give them percentages or whatever." And I said, "Well, that's fine. That model works for a lot of folks. To your point, I want a law firm that survives me. And the best way to do that is to invest in your people, to help them be better." I challenge my lawyers and say, "What are you doing this year to be a better lawyer than you were last year? I'll pay you any amount of money for any seminar, any classes, any time off you need to go to camps or training or whatever. I could care less. The firm will support all of that." I have paralegals here who go to national conferences that are like trucking conferences, for example. I have 2 lawyers out of 4 in the whole state are board certified. They're in my firm. I have a third one getting ready to be board certified in truck accident. I want the best lawyers. I want lawyers who are better than me. My son and my daughter are lawyers here. I take so much pride in watching them, but I take just as much pride in watching the other attorneys that I have, because they grew up in my firm. I had another lawyer at a conference tell me, he's like, "Well, if you spend all that money, aren't you worried about them leaving?" And I said, "Well, guys, what if they stay and they don't get?" I want my lawyers to be better,
yeah,
learn. I want them studying. I want them taking the time, because as lawyers, you're busy. I mean, you got a caseload. You're trying to generate cash. And you're trying to do this and settle cases and help clients. But a certain amount of your time should be growth. And a certain amount of your time should be, okay, what am I going to do to make myself better so that I'm a better trial lawyer? Because in this market, with AI and with a lot of other things, you better be darn good at what you do. And because that's something that not everybody can copy. That's not something that, especially a trial work.
and we talked about that being the first prerequisite. Being a client-focused firm is important, and really that's the difference maker. But first and foremost, you've got to be a good lawyer, because if you're not, then as you shared earlier, being client-focused means literally nothing. And if the attorneys on your team aren't good attorneys, then the firm is slowly dying, because the minute you retire and your partners retire, then you've got, subpar attorneys in terms of their legal skills managing the firm.
And one of the points I always make is that although it's never been easier to hire the wrong attorney, it's also never been easier to be the right attorney. It's never been easier to learn. I mean, when I started 40 years ago, we didn't have podcasts. We didn't have as many books out there. We didn't have as many specialty seminars. We didn't have as many organizations. I mean, there's so many niches that you could be, like a brain injury lawyer. You can be an estate lawyer. You can be a criminal defense lawyer. Whatever it is, there are organizations out there that they've got top lawyers already trained, and they're willing to teach you. Let's say I graduated from law school. I want to be a truck accident attorney. I would join the ATAA, and they have a podcast or a video on almost every topic you can imagine in their library that you would have access. And why wouldn't you just invest the time? My first year, I'd be spending all the time I could spend on reading and listening and watching every podcast, every seminar, and so I could teach myself a body of law. There's no excuse to not be the best of whatever it is you want to be, because that information is out there. And now, once you get the knowledge, obviously you have to go get experience. And so maybe you get the first case, or maybe you go work with somebody and you find somebody who has who's board certified in whatever area it is you like. And you say, "Can I just tag along? Can I just watch? Can I just listen and learn?" And I don't know any good trial lawyer or any good lawyer in their area who's not going to help teach you and let you come in and learn. And so You get that first case, you work with somebody else, you learn, get the knowledge, and then you develop your own skill set.
Let's talk a little bit about firms that grow too fast. I'm sure you've seen it in your experience, firms that invested a lot of money in advertising and, all of a sudden had phone call after phone call, form fill after form fill, chat after chat, people trying to hire them, and they simply grew too fast without the infrastructure to support it. What do you believe the failure points are in a firm like that?
Well, I think the bottom line is what's motivating. If my goal is just to acquire a bunch of cases and it's not quality service, then I'm going to get all these cases and I'm going to do a bad job with them because I'm not qualified. Now, if it's to make a big difference in clients' lives and to do a good job on each case and add value to a case, then I'm going to set up procedures and I'm going to have the people and the resources that it takes to make sure I get that done. Even as I add cases, we have to look at things differently. So we're going to hire somebody who's a senior software designer and programmer from a huge company. We're going to bring them into a law firm. We have to bring in social worker who's going to take time and listen to our clients. It's not an income producing position. Sure, lawyers could do it, but lawyers are not trained to listen as well as a social worker. And so I think, you have to build that infrastructure. If you don't have that infrastructure, then you dump a bunch of cases in there and you're not going to be able to handle the cases in a way that they need to be handled for you to grow.
And, that short-term investment, though, can have really profitable long-term gains.
Yep.
Yeah. So that's a good segue to my last question in this segment. So you started your practice nearly 30 years ago. David, and you and your partners have done an absolutely phenomenal job creating a business model that really works. What advice would you offer a solo attorney or a small firm, 2-attorney, 3-attorney firm that is, again, perhaps, like we just described a few minutes ago, that firm that's getting tons of leads but don't have the infrastructure in place? What advice would you give them to build the kind of team and the kind of processes and procedures, the structure that you have at your firm? What advice would you give that attorney or those attorneys to build what they have now, to take what they have now and build what you have today? And is it even possible considering the legal landscape today?
I think, I've had a lot of people who have helped me over the years, who've given me guidance. I think teaming up with the right people. I mean, law school does a great job making you feel like you're really smart and you know everything. The real world, thank goodness, the people around me remind me every day that I'm not as smart and I need all the help I can get.
It's good to have that.
And I think that, working with companies like yours, I think working with, you have to pick the right team. There's a bunch of good companies out there, but if you don't listen to them or you don't use them and you don't follow their advice and you just want to give them a check, it's probably not going to work out.
No.
So that if I was a young or small firm, had business coming in, then I would say, okay, if I'm not a business major, I happen to be a business major. My son, who's an attorney here, has a finance MBA plus a law degree. But I think that if I didn't have those people, I would go look for those. There's a lot of lawyers like me out there that are helpful and willing to help kind of build that foundation. What has worked? What have I done that's not worked? That's the thing, is not to be afraid to ask, not be afraid to look and try to gain that information. But then you have to listen. That's some of the hard part for some of us.
All right. So now let's shift gears. I've got 6 rapid fire questions. So I'll ask the question, give me, right off the top of your head, sort of a 30-second, maybe 45-second quick answer on each of these questions, whatever jumps to mind first. So number 1, what is the biggest mistake a law firm owner makes when they first start investing seriously in marketing?
I think that, everybody out there sells you a quick fix. Everybody's got this is the magic bullet. And they don't invest enough time to look into it to see, is it substantial? Is it credible? Will it work? And so they just want a quick fix.
Number 2, one question every prospective client should ask an attorney before signing up with that attorney that almost no prospective client ever asks.
I would say if you can only ask one question, and no matter what area of the law it is, are you board certified in that area? That's going to eliminate a whole bunch of people. So that's the main thing. Second one would just be, have you ever handled a case like mine? and how did that come out? And give me details.
Okay. Third, a marketing tactic that looks good on paper, but you've actually watched fail in practice.
I think I'm not a big fan of pay-per-clicks. It can get you business, but it's not a good way to build a business. And so I don't have anything against it, but you have to be careful with it. And so I would just say quickly that that's something that for me, it's not something that I like very well, unless you want to look for something really quick that you need cases, I guess.
Yeah. Fair enough.
The goal is to build it over long term.
Yeah.
Build something that takes longer, but will last longer. And that's harder. It takes longer. It takes more time. It takes more money. You have to work with people like yourself that can help you create the content that helps you, drives your business, helps drive, Google, your AI searches. And that's not pay-per-clicks.
If you were making your first attorney hire tomorrow, what's the number one thing you would have to see in that prospective hire, that new attorney, in order for them to separate themselves from the crowd?
It would depend on which kind of lawyer I was hiring. If I was hiring a trial lawyer versus a research lawyer, I would look and make sure that the characteristics and the personality fits that role. I would look at the Colby scores and the Print scores and say, does it fit? But I would want somebody who is empathetic. And I usually look and say, well, what have they done in their lives that show they care about people? And look for those type of things, because it's usually, they tell you in an interview, I care about people. But I like to see, well, what action have you taken that shows that?
All right. Number 5, book, podcast, media resource that you've encountered over the past 27 years. What jumps to mind immediately that helped you the most in terms of building your practice?
Yeah. I mean, because again, I was a business major, so I understood business. I understood KPIs. But I would say, when I joined Chris, Mike, and Jessica Mogul, they reinforced that it was a business. And so I started listening to that, started reading more, started spending more time saying, wait a minute, I know this.
Okay.
I didn't mean to plug it for the.
That's fine. That's fine.
But that's been more powerful, more information that helped me focus on the things that I should focus on, that I knew to focus on.
And lastly, for a law firm leader, a law firm owner who might be listening right now, what is the one thing you think, or the most important thing you think they should take away from our conversation, or more importantly, from your experience?
Yeah, I think that you should be constantly looking for how to differentiate yourself from everybody else. What are you good at? What makes you different? And that's what you should be marketing. And then you have to look at it and say, okay, I understand there's going to be these major players coming in my market. So what? How do I still win? How do I create? One of the things I just came up with, this is called semicrashmap.com. So now in Indiana, I track every semi-wreck that happens in the state of Indiana in real time. And so that's something that no one else has. It gives me content on where the wrecks are happening, why they're happening, all the information that no one else has in Indiana. Whether it's that or whether it's the podcast or the books, whatever it is there's so many different ideas out there that haven't even been thought of yet. But when you're looking at it saying, I'm going to lose, then you're going to lose. When you're looking at it saying, I've got to come up with something different, something unique, something that nobody else has, then that's what makes it fun, makes it rewarding, and that also makes you a good competitor.
Yeah.
A successful business leader.
Okay. All right. David, thank you very much. So for anyone listening, law firm owners specifically, who want to perhaps get a copy of your book, podcast, or simply just connect with you, how should they go about doing that?
Yeah, so I'm on LinkedIn. David W. Craig. My law firm is Craig, Kelley Faultless. ckflaw.com is my website. On Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. My podcast, After the Crash, is on YouTube. So I'm pretty easy to find. I'm happy to spend time and talk to you and happy to provide you with copies of the book.
And the title of the book again?
It's Never Been Easier to Hire the Wrong Attorney is my most recent book.
David, thank you. You're not just selling a system or an idea. You are really diving deeply into and describing what 40 years of your experience and doing things the right way actually produces. The model's real, your firm is real, and the clients who found you because they've read your book or listened to your podcast are real. The lesson that every law firm owner listening to this episode is not go build an empire. It's a thing you said in our prep call. Before you market it, you have to learn how to do it. So for everyone listening, if this conversation gave you something to think about, you were able to take something useful away to help you improve your practice, subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your podcasts, and share with another firm owner who you think needs to hear it. I'm Rob Rosasco, and this is The Legal Edge. Thanks, and see you next time.